If you like this video, please give a thumbs up and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to be notified of new videos. There are many claims of alien abduction every year across the world. Most are best to be taken with a pinch of salt. Some of them, however, is both more intriguing and credible than the rest. Particularly those that are little known about, usually due to the persons involved being perfectly aware of just how crazy they sound, and so do not seek publicity of any kind, and certainly no monetary reward for their reports. Perhaps because of this, their stories and accounts might be treated a little more seriously. Here are 10 such encounters that are far from well known, but perhaps deserve a thorough investigation. 10 Carol and Helen Thomas. Abducted in an alleyway in the early hours of March 30, 1988, Helen Thomas and her mother Carol set off for work at the nearby mill. 1. They walked through the city housing estates and back alleyways as they always did. This particular morning, however, both women suddenly noticed a low humming sound above them, before an intense, bright light shone down, effectively blinding them. As the light disappeared, both women came to their senses, feeling a little nauseous and dizzy. Helen's leather jacket was soaking wet, yet all around them, the ground was dry. Feeling confused, the two women carried on their way to work. Once there, they were informed by the security guard that they were several hours late. Over the following days, their skin would come out in blisters and rashes, and a constant feeling of anxiety ran through both women. It would be several years before they made contact with leading UFO researcher, Tony Dodd, who agreed to conduct interviews with the women under hypnosis. Each would recall being taken into a large bright room, and laid on tables. An unusual net-like material was placed on their legs that seemed to weigh them down. Creatures with large heads and large dark eyes performed strange experiments on him, including the taking of eggs from their bodies through a thin tube inserted into their bellies. Everything was wet to touch, and even more bizarrely, one of the aliens took a particular liking to Helen's jacket, rubbing the material across its face and through its hands, resulting in it becoming soaking wet. 9 Tracy Jones. Regular abductions since childhood. The mysterious events that surrounded Tracy Jones began to be revealed in the summer of 1997 and were more akin to paranormal activity as opposed to alien abduction or intervention. She would regularly find household items moved about, or even having vanished completely, only to turn up again completely out of the blue. Electrical appliances would stop working without reason, and both Tracy and her husband, Darren, would awake to see strange figures around their bed. One particularly odd incident happened following major surgery that Tracy had undergone. A large, flat bandage masked the incision on her chest. One morning, she went to remove the bandage only to find it was gone. 2. Furthermore, the wound had completely healed over and only a very small scar remained. Under hypnotic regression, Tracy described being abducted since she was young. Each time she was subjected to medical tests and examinations, including the removal of eggs through a long silver tube. What's more, she claimed during these sessions that her children have also been abducted on regular occasions since their birth. When the family moved to Dubai for Darren's job, the paranormal activity continued to happen, as it did when they moved back to the United Kingdom several months later. 8 Multiple abduction at a BBQ. One summer evening in July 1995, couples and friends Mike and Debbie joined Steve and Annie at their Derbyshire house for a barbecue and several drinks. The night suddenly took a bizarre and frightening turn. A little after 10:30 p.m., 3, out of nowhere, an unusual disc-shaped craft hung over them. They watched it for several minutes before all four of them began to feel extremely nauseous. The UFO then vanished as quickly as it had arrived. Steve looked over to the barbecue that only moments before had been glowing hot. It was now nothing but grey ash. The meat burned to a crisp. He checked his watch and was alarmed and confused to find it was well after midnight. Almost 90 minutes had passed. Over the next few days, they all began to feel generally unwell, have trouble sleeping, and an overall feeling of anxiety. The friends agreed to be hypnotically regressed, and all four told the same story. They had been taken on board the spacecraft, and into a medical room where they were placed on tables for examination. The walls were described by Debbie as being round but divided into squares, while Steve claimed he saw figures and drawings on the walls of various planets, including ones from our solar system that he could clearly recognize. 7 Gary Wood. The A-70 incident. While traveling along the A-70 with his friend Colin Wright, at just after 10 p.m. on August 17, 1992, Gary Wood noticed a black object in the distance. 4. Alerting his friend, both men watched as the object came closer before a blinding white light formed a wall in front of the vehicle. Wood continued to drive the car forward, transfixed by the bright intensity. The next thing both men knew, the car had come to a complete stop, facing the opposite direction. They had no memory of turning the vehicle around, or what had happened to the light and the object they had seen. When Wood looked at his wristwatch, it now readjusts after 11 p.m. Both men, extremely shaken, realized something was wrong. They would reluctantly undergo hypnotic regression to try to recover the lost hour. The results were startling. Both spoke of feeling intense pain as the car had driven into the light, as if they were experiencing a strong electric shock. 3 extraterrestrial beings had come to the vehicle and escorted both men onto their spacecraft, which had landed in the road. Each was stripped of his clothing and placed on a table for examination. Wood recalled that he could hear agonizing human screams coming from the room around him. Overseeing the whole episode was a taller creature, with a large head and big, dark eyes. However, it is what Wood claimed the alien, through telepathy, said to him that is perhaps most chilling. In response to a question Wood could not recall asking, the tall alien stated, "Sanctuary, we are here already and we are coming here." 6 Philip Spencer. The Ilky Moor incident. On the morning of December 1, 1987, a little past 7 a.m., the witness, known under the assumed name, the former policeman, Phillip Spencer, set off from his home in Ilky, across the Yorkshire moors to his father-in-law's house. 5. As he drove along an otherwise quiet country road, with daylight barely breaking over the area, he could hear what sounded like a low-flying helicopter. He looked around but could see nothing unusual in the sky. He did, however, see a strange, small creature standing on the hillside next to the road. He brought his car to a stop and made his way towards the mysterious figure, which was now heading up the slope to a quarry at the top. He managed to take a picture before it disappeared out of sight. By the time he had reached the top of the hill, the creature was nowhere to be seen, but a huge silver disc was just in the process of shooting into the sky directly above him. He returned to his car, and given the events he had just witnessed, returned home. Only as he arrived back, did he realize it was after 10 a.m. and he could not account for nearly 3 hours. Vivid, intense dreams began to haunt Spencer over the coming days, leading him to undergo hypnosis. He revealed that he had stood underneath the silver disc staring at it in amazement when he was suddenly lifted from the ground and taken on board. He would find himself in a medical room, on a table, and he distinctly remembers a voice inside his head telling him not to be afraid. The next thing he knew, he was back on the ground, and the alien craft was moving up and away from him. Incidentally, the photograph he snapped was proven to be authentic and not tampered with. 5 John Day, family abduction. Returning home to Essex in October 1974 with his wife and children, John Day, who had no belief whatsoever in UFOs or aliens, 6, had an encounter that would change his mind forever. The journey should have taken half an hour. Getting the family home at around 9:45 p.m. they arrived as normal, left the car, and got the children ready for bed. As they were doing so, John realized the time was almost 1 a.m. The journey had seemingly taken him over 3 hours. Over the coming days, all members of the family began to experience terrifying nightmares so intense they were afraid to go to sleep. John and his wife, Susan, also had a perpetual feeling of anxiety and confusion. John, on the advice of a local UFO report group, contacted Leonard Wilder, a hypnotist who was familiar with such cases of missing time. Under hypnosis, John spoke of driving into a strange bright mist that had suddenly fallen from the sky. A bright light began to descend into a nearby field, which then shot towards the car. The whole vehicle was lifted onto another object, that John described as a spaceship. Even under hypnosis, John's memories were hazy. He recalled a metal arm swinging over him, as well as feeling as if he was being poked by sharp instruments. He also recalled that the spaceship had furniture that was molded to the walls, with no obvious seams. The next memory he had is of driving his family onto his driveway. Point 4, Mrs. G. abducted while hanging out washing in her back garden. A woman known only as Mrs. G, due to her request for strict anonymity, noticed a strange blue light descending straight down from above. It became stationary around 100 feet, 30 meters, above her. The light came down and enveloped her. Before she realized what was happening, she began to rise from the ground inside the glowing beam. She found herself in a room with 3 otherworldly beings across from her. She described them as tall, wearing tight, shiny metallic suits, and a balaclava-type hat on their heads. The next thing she knew, she felt a sharp blow on the back of her neck, and she was standing in her garden again. A quick look at her watch revealed several hours had passed, 7, since she first left her house to hang out her washing, all of which, incidentally, still sat in the basket. Point 3, Bob Rylance. Abducted several times over 2 decades. Bob Rylance is a military veteran with over 20 years of experience, yet only when he agreed to undergo hypnotic regression did he realize that during that time, he had regularly been abducted by visitors from another world. In the same way as the aforementioned Tracy Jones, Rylance had always noted strange paranormal experiences, such as hearing buzzing late at night, 8, and footsteps in the hall and landing outside his bedroom. Like many others before him, once under hypnosis, he would describe in detail being taken into a room and placed on a medical bench where various experiments were performed on him. On one particular occasion, he recalled having a triangular grid placed on his stomach, while at the same time being told telepathically that it was to cure a diseased part of your stomach. 2. Sharon from Yorkshire, abducted by the builders of the pyramids. Sharon, a young mother of 2 from Yorkshire, heard accounts of alien abduction one afternoon on the radio and decided to seek information and help. Although she had no interest in UFOs, she had been experiencing unusual events for some time, including missing time and strange marks on her body. She wished to go under hypnosis to finally get to the bottom of the anxious feelings that welled up inside her. She would indeed tell of being abducted, being taken aboard a spacecraft, and of having intense and invasive medical experiments carried out on her. Perhaps more bizarrely, she also recalled being stood with many other abductees on a ramp, as if they were awaiting transportation somewhere. She even went as far as to recognize one of these fellow abductees, a gentleman she would name as Nigel. Maybe her most spine-chilling announcement, however, was of an abduction that occurred when she was still a teenager. While having a cigarette at the bottom of the garden away from her family, she found herself being lifted off the ground and onto an alien ship with Egyptian writing on the walls. 9. Following an examination, she and others were told that they have to respect the earth and not pollute it. Then they spoke about the need to learn about pyramids. According to Sharon, her captors claimed, "We put pyramids here." 1. The Devereux family abduction. Returning home on the A65 road in North Yorkshire just after 5 p.m. in January 2005, Rachel Devereux, along with her 2 sons, Benji and Alex, and her mother, Anne, would see a bright light that seemed to be following their car. They continued to watch it for several minutes before it dived towards them and then sped off out of sight. They continued on their 10-minute journey, realizing when they arrived home that it was well after 6 p.m. Feeling confused about the hour of missing time, Rachel and the family attempted to put the incident out of their minds. However, Alex began to speak of weird dreams he was having, where he was flying over the countryside in a strange bubble. 10. Rachel eventually agreed to undergo hypnotic regression to try and recover the missing hour. She claimed that upon the light descending, all of the family were flown up to an alien craft. Once inside, she would describe the room as having no walls and like standing in space. A dazzling light shone overhead, and there were little ones moving around them, observing and studying them. According to the family, they still see strange lights over their family home, leading many UFO researchers to believe that they are likely to repeat abductees, and probably have been for some time.